Hello class. So today at home that you are going to explore the historical context of the next book that we're reading called The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. And in order to better understand this book, we first need to again look at the historical context of the book. It's set in the 1920s. So I am going to first go through and introduce you to the main kind of movements and events of the era. So, introducing you to the 20s, the era of the 1920s. So that is when Gatsby was hanging out. So the 20s are also called the Roaring Twenties because they were just that crazy. And in Europe they're actually called the Golden Age of the 20s. But we don't need to know that because we're Americans. But, so the 20s were kind of defined by three main forces that we're going to talk about. So first, there was a huge explosion of incredible economic prosperity. The stock market was going crazy. People were spending money like absolute crazy. So that was great. Also, there were a lot of new people coming to America. And so there were obviously some serious tensions between social classes, so like rich and poor, and also different levels of people in the upper class. So people who had money for a really long time and people who were making a lot of money in the stock market. And also races, aka our arm wrestlers over here. And also some serious tensions between Americans and all the immigrants flooding into the country at the time, a lot of which were coming through New York City, where our story is set. So, and so for our unit, we are really going to be exploring how this era was really defining a defining period in examining the meaning, there's an E in there, the meaning of, well, this is long, the American dream. I'm sure you guys have probably all heard that term, but this is going to be a constant theme throughout our entire unit, and we're going to be exploring it through the lens of Mr. Gatsby. So, first we're going to look at a couple of the major historical events and movements of the time. Okay, cool. Here's our train. It's moving. It's going places. So, number one. So, in 1914 began the First World War, also known as the Great War, World War I. Big stuff going on. 1914 to, I think, November of 1918. Also call it, again, the Great War, but European people usually call it the Great War. It was a big, big deal for them because it happened on their continent. Here we go. So, our players in the World War I. So we had on one side the United Kingdom and France, those cheese lovers in France, and on the other side we had Germany and Austria, Austria and Hungary were basically an empire of sorts back then. One really, really big company. And also Italy, the salami lovers down there. And then we had Switzerland. I don't even know what this country's doing. It's just caught in the middle there. And then, you know, Mediterranean Sea there. And so UK and the France are known as, or were known as, the Allies, and were also known by that term in the Second World War. And Germany and Italy and Austria were known as the Triple Alliance. So, the World War One was a very interesting new war because of all the technology, all the technological advances that were going on in the world really fed into this war. And it was the first time that you saw stuff like tanks, great stuff like tanks and airplanes, and even chemical warfare like gas was in the war as well. So it was a really new kind of warfare and woke a lot of people up. So in 1917, the Americans declared war on Germany and decided that they were going to help out. So that is very important for our unit because, as you will read, Mr. Gatsby has a strong connection to the First World War. So the Americans sent over 4 million. Oh, let's make sure we get these zeros. Is that 4 million? That's 4 million. 4 million troops to France. So most of the war happened right here. And a bunch of trenches, and they just kept shooting at each other. And by the end of the war, we had like 110,000 dead people. But a lot of people returned home. A lot of those 4 million troops. And they returned home, returned back to America as war heroes. All the ladies absolutely loved them. They were big shots. And a lot of them were very decorated with medals and stuff. And the other great thing is they came back and spent money. The government gave them some money through the war, and they also re-entered the labor force. So that did great things for the economy because we got a bunch of strapping young gentlemen back in our country. So we're going to take a shift up to the top of the paper now and get back to life after the war. And we're going to really examine what the culture of the 1920s was like. So, first, we had the emergence of massive cities, like New York, where our story is set, and Chicago, St. Louis, Philadelphia, all fueled by, well, one second. In these cities, some big things got built. This could be kind of called the era of the skyscraper, because more and more huge buildings were being built. Like in 1929, the Empire State Building, right here, was constructed in New York. Well, an amazing thing is that most of these cities were built by immigrants coming to the United States. They had a big part in it, but they were mostly just the builders of the buildings. And new thing is that these cities were filled with a lot of new forms of fun, which you guys probably wouldn't know anything about. Especially the first thing I want to talk about, which is alcohol. So this big thing called Prohibition happened, and the government said that you could not sell, so they banned sales, production, and distribution of alcohol. We're just going to do the triple X thing, you know, it's explicit. And those came through something called the Volstead Act, which you don't need to know too much about, but it happened. And the 18th Amendment. The 18th Amendment. Cool. Alright, and one of the interesting things that you'll definitely see in Gatsby is that regulation of these laws was always segregated between classes. So what happened is a lot of rich people, even before the 18th Amendment was passed, stockpiled all their booze. They just had it in their basement. In fact, I'm pretty sure the president had some in his. So, but poor people got absolutely bashed for having alcohol all the time. Another thing that happened, which you'll also see in Gatsby, is that powerful gangs emerged in our big cities. And they made a lot of money on controlling the illegal market for booze. And that will be very important for us actually in the book. So, we're going to talk a little bit more about what kinds of fun were going on in the era itself. So first of all, this really new thing was going on called jazz, which has roots way, way back in the slave era, but was being popularized guys like Louis Armstrong, awesome jazz player, and Duke Ellington, both of those guys. And so there are all sorts of jazz clubs and speakeasies where people would go. Also, the image of a 1920s woman was very specific, and these girls identify themselves as flappers. The girls of the 20s. Oh, that's supposed to be, this is her pearl necklace. She said, hey, you wanna dance? So these girls were out, they were rebelling, they were dancing, they were drinking, they were, doing all sorts of explicit stuff that your parents wouldn't want you to do. And so everything was going great. On top of that, we had, even, as I was talking about in the First World War, even more technological advances going on. So we had automobiles to get around, which was great. Automobiles, there we go, I think that's right. Automobiles. We had motion pictures. Oh my gosh. Motion pictures. And motion pictures created celebrities and film stars. So this was an era where we had actually a lot of famous people kind of coming on the stage. And this kind of fit in actually to the world of sports as well. We had guys like Bobby Jones and golf, and a name that I'm pretty sure you guys know, Babe Ruth. One of the greatest baseball players of all time. And so basically, this era really espoused limitless possibilities. Everybody thought everything was just going up and could only continue to go up. Possibilities. And unfortunately, they're kind of wrong about that. So, that brings us to the stock market. Our stock market here. So, at the beginning of the 20s, 1920, our stock market went up and up and up and up. So the Dow Jones, which is kind of an index of our market, it's like the 30, Dow Jones Industrial, it's like the 30 most profitable companies in the market. So it went up by 10 times its value throughout the decade, its initial value. That's huge. People made so much cash flow. So it just kept going up and up and up, and people kept drinking, and people kept going to jazz concerts and driving their fancy cars, and lots and lots of careless people put money in stock market. Look at all this moolah. George Washington was very happy. And the stock market also brought up a very interesting thing, which we will definitely see in the book, which is the difference between old money and new money. So, especially in the Northeast, and especially around the city of New York, there are people that had real estate there and had money kind of in the area for hundreds of years. And people were making new money in the stock market with all these different consumer products and new companies that were coming out. And the people with old money were very kind of opposed to being kind of threatened by all these people with new money who were buying new houses and new places in their areas. So, of course, everything that goes up must come down. And Wall Street, as it always seems to do, crashed in 1929 at the very end of the decade, and the market lost $30 billion in value in the span of 3 days. So this is known as Black Tuesday in history. That was the day when the market lost most of its value and most people took most of their money out of the market. And this put the United States and most of the Western world into what we call the Great Depression, which was a basically 10-year recession that didn't end until the United States became involved with the Second World War. So, in general, this is where we need to be in order to understand the book The Great Gatsby and understand the characters in it and understand the places where they're coming from and the underlying tensions in the story. I hope you enjoy this, and we'll see you in class tomorrow.